I am speaking to State Senator Bruce Tarr, as I do almost every week. Hi, Senator. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing very well, thanks, Heather. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good,
And
good.
you are going to tell us about something called the Chapter 90 bill, which nobody knows about.
Well, not enough attention gets paid to this, and I think it's important, so I'm happy to talk about it. I also want to note how comfortable the dog in the background looks, and I think we could all be a little bit envious of that, but
Well, thank you. I actually meant to get rid of her before we started our interview, but if you're all right with her, I'm all right with her.
she is a wonderful addition.
Yeah, this is Ruby. And Ruby is so happy that it's not 90 degrees. She's a much more comfortable dog today.
As am I. So we have something in common.
Exactly. So we'll,
But no, at any rate, just to talk about Chapter 90 for a minute. Chapter 90 is the program by which the state provides resources to cities and towns to maintain roads and bridges. And in the statute, there is a formula that determines how much money every city and town gets. It's largely determined on the number of road miles that a community has. And every year we bond that money. We authorize the borrowing of money, the proceeds of which will go to cities and towns. And the reason that it's bonded money is because it's a capital improvement. So it tends to have a life, we hope, of longer than 5 years. And that makes it worthy of the state issuing bonds as opposed to using operating dollars, I'm sorry. This is more of a long-term investment. And so, really, no surprise. Just a short while ago, the House moved its version of the Chapter 90 bill, and the Senate yesterday took up our version of the Chapter 90 bill. And it's an amount that has been fairly static for a while. It's $200 million for cities and towns that will go out according to that formula. Now, the bill also has an additional $100 million in borrowing and authorization for some specific categories of local transportation spending. And as I often do, I want to make sure that I read them so that I get them right. But we have $25 million for the municipal bridge program, $25 million to address local bottleneck reduction, because we've certainly seen some traffic issues before and after the heart of the pandemic, $25 million for bus transit infrastructure, and $25 million for grants for electric vehicles and for cities and towns and regional transit authorities. And this is something that's particularly important on Cape Ann because there's been a very organized effort with the Cape Ann Climate Coalition to look at how we might transition CATA, for instance, to use more electric buses to reduce carbon emissions. So the fact that this is in the bill is very significant. I also tried to amend the bill because, and I did so unsuccessfully, but I'm going to pursue this in the future. I believe that our state should have a master plan for where charging facilities are so that we can encourage folks to use electric vehicles by making sure that they have some sense that wherever they are in the state, there'll be a way to recharge them. And I think it's particularly important to try to match that recharging capability with alternative energy so that to the greatest extent possible, we aren't burning fossil fuels to be able to make the energy to recharge the electric vehicles. So this wasn't necessarily the bill where this was going to happen, but I think it was important to talk about it, and I'm going to continue to talk about it in the hopes that we can get that kind of a master plan.
And I know that Rockport did just receive state money to install 6 charging stations, I believe.
Yes. So we do, there is a state grant program that provides grant money for that infrastructure. And this particular bond bill will provide more of those types of funds. But really the meat and potatoes of the Chapter 90 bill are dollars that communities can use for paving roads or reconstructing bridges. Because in a lot of cases, municipal budgets are really strained. And on their own, they can't support the kind of aggressive programs that we need to maintain our roads. And so this is really a lifeline that's been in place for a number of years to be able to provide just basic transportation assistance for infrastructure to cities and towns.
Well, that is very great. And how often is this this money, this bill replenished?
So that's a great question. That actually has been the subject of a bit of debate over the last few years because right now it's done on an annual basis. And one of the challenges is always to get both the House and the Senate and the administration to agree in time to capture the full breadth of the construction season. So cities and towns really can begin in early spring working on roads and bridges, but unless they have an authorization that they know they can rely upon, it's hard for them to do that. So one of the things that's been discussed, and this has been an idea that's been championed primarily by the Senate, is to look at whether we can do maybe multiple years, 2 or 3 years at a time, so that it provides more reliability, so that you don't have to wait every year in the spring to make sure this is going to get authorized. So far, that hasn't happened. So it's an annual event in terms of authorizing this money. And again, it's been about $200 million for quite some time.
Well, you also want to talk about something called re-precincting.
Yes, and again, this is something that oftentimes flies under the radar screen, so to speak, because it happens in a very matter-of-fact way that doesn't create a lot of attention or draw a lot of attention. But this year it is. And the reason that it is because, as you know, we've had a decennial census, and we need to redistrict every district in the Commonwealth, both for the legislature as well as the federal, the House of Representatives, and the folks that have districts for that. And unfortunately, there's been a delay in getting the information, and that delay continues from the folks in the federal government, so that we know the accurate numbers to draw the districts. So an idea has surfaced that rather than wait to draw those districts on the municipalities to draw the precincts, maybe we'll reverse it. Normally, the way this occurs is the municipalities draw the precincts, and then those are the building blocks upon which the districts are based, the House districts, the Senate districts, the congressional districts. But in order to make sure that we can meet the timelines that we need to meet, the proposal that moved through the House and is now probably going to be taken up in the Senate next Thursday would say that the state and the House and the Senate and the governor will draw the districts and then send the maps to the cities and towns, and they will fill those districts in with precincts. This is not an idea that is without controversy. And so, for instance, the Secretary of State has been somewhat opposed to it. There's an extensive discussion going on with local clerks and the Mass Municipal Association about the propriety of reversing this order just for this year because of the tight timeframes that we're facing.
So is it possible for you to explain what Secretary Galvin's opposition is to this idea? Why is it harder? Why is it much more complicated?
I would never want to put words in anyone's mouth, including the secretary, but my understanding is that he feels the cities and towns ought to have their autonomy protected in terms of starting the process of drawing the precincts, rather than having the state hand down a map that already has boundaries and saying, okay, fill it with precincts. So he wants to, as I understand it, maintain the usual flow of things so that the cities and towns have the ability to start the process, and in that way, it could be argued have some more autonomy.
And if the census information is late, why doesn't that impact the drawing of the congressional districts?
Well, it will impact it, but the idea is that we would get started a little bit sooner because the legislature won't wait for precincting to happen. Okay. So we would begin drawing those maps now. In fact, the redistricting committee, and I am a member of the Senate redistricting committee, we're working right now, even with preliminary information, to try to figure out what Senate districts are going to look like. So the idea is, if we waited for the cities and towns to send their precinct maps, that might take us a little longer. In the end, we're still in a very challenging situation because we're all waiting for the data that we need to finish the respective jobs that we have to do.
Right. And is the governor or is anyone anticipating any big swings in population in the state of Massachusetts?
We are not. The early indications are that we may have had some more growth than we expected. But one of the most concerning things is where that growth is occurring. And one of the things that we've been focused on is how little growth relatively there may have been in Western Massachusetts versus Eastern Massachusetts. And so, for instance, Western Massachusetts Senate districts are already very large. We're talking, our Senate district is about 17 communities. There's one Senate district in Western Mass that I believe, and I wouldn't want to be quoted on this, but I believe has somewhere in the order of magnitude of 40 communities. And so the concern is that that type of district might have to continue to move east because of the way the population has shifted. So I don't think we're anticipating any very large surprises, but we have had some significant changes in population.
Hmm. Well, this is going to be really interesting to watch. I've been asking you to talk about redistricting for a long time, and this is going to be a really interesting process. So when do you think we will know if there's a decision about this reversal?
We probably should know within the next, I would say, 2 weeks. The House has passed a version of the bill. The Senate's going to take it up on Thursday. As we talk right now, I honestly can't tell you that I've taken a position on this. I'm still thinking about the relative merits of each side of the discussion. But my anticipation is that the Senate will do something on Thursday, and then there'll be a reconciliation between the House and the Senate versions. And probably the following week is when we might see something happen, because again, we're very sensitive to time.
Well, thank you again for meeting with us. We're always grateful for a conversation with you.
It's a real pleasure. And I have to say that it's always great to be able to talk about some of the things that don't always get attention on Beacon Hill, and to be able to share some insight with you and be able to answer your questions about them. So it's an opportunity I really appreciate. And again, I'm not sure when this will air, but if folks are seeing this after the 4th of July, I hope you've had a wonderful 4th of July weekend and joined in the celebration of what remains to be the greatest nation on the face of this earth. And that we'll all take a moment to remember the folks that have sacrificed to make it that, and that we'll also think about our obligation to make it still greater.
Thank you.